Hello, Abnormal Investigations. I got another video drop for you. I hope you guys are going to really enjoy this one. I'm looking forward to it. And I hope everybody's having a great Friday, guys. It's the end of the week, so we got the weekend to come up. And Saturday for our live at 9 o'clock Central Standard Time. Don't forget to join us then. And thank you for everybody that is helping bringing Hunter home. It is greatly appreciated. The links are in the description if you would like to help. Let's get into today's story. April 29th, 2019. The moon phase on that day would have been a waning crescent. Let me start off by saying that this story that I have never told anybody. This encounter happened in the woods of southern New Jersey. My girlfriend, her sister Shelley, her boyfriend Craig, and I decided to take a 2-day camping trip into the woods. It was an hour drive from our apartment in Philadelphia without traffic, so we woke up early in the morning to beat the traffic and to avoid the 3.5-hour drive. We arrived in Burlingame, New Jersey, and we stopped at the Acme grocery store and bought chicken, bread, hot dogs, and a case of water, and a few other snacks for us to live off of for the next 2 days on our adventure. We took a back road toward the rural area of the country, which was close to a military base. We arrived at our destination and wasted no time getting out of the car. The area was a wasteland, no cars passing or turning or passing around, and nobody parked, nothing at all. It was completely quiet. I immediately got a feeling of dread but tried to suppress it to prevent from ruining our trip. We spent the next half hour finding a perfect spot to set up camp. We ended up picking a spot near a clearing that was by a service road and a line of telephone poles. We set up camp as nightfall came quick. My girlfriend and her sister set up the tent as me and Craig built the fire and put the chairs around the fire. By the time we were finished, it was already about 9 p.m. since we arrived around roughly 7 p.m. As we sat around the fire, I got up to take a leak behind a tree about 20 yards behind the tent. As I was doing my business, the woods fell dead silent. All activity was gone. No crickets or birds called, just complete silence. I began to get the feeling of dread again. As I finished up, I began to feel a presence, as if something was watching me. I walked back to the campsite and asked them if they had noticed how the area suddenly fell silent. They looked at me crazy, brushed it off as a common trait of the wilderness. We sat out, talking and laughing until about 12 midnight, then we hit the tent for the night. I laid next to my girlfriend closest to the mesh window, which was open. After about 30 minutes of just lying there, I began to doze off. I was just about to fall asleep until I was startled by deer running at a full speed through our campsite. At the time, it didn't seem too odd, so I just brushed it off, thinking it ran through here fast to avoid contact with us. After calming down from the sudden rush of adrenaline, I finally managed to fall back asleep. At about 2:30 a.m., I was awoken by my girlfriend, who was frantically shaking me. She was bug-eyed and pale as snow. I sat up, trying to calm her down to find out what the problem was. At this point, Shelley and Craig were wide awake, confused about the whole commotion going on. My girlfriend finally calmed down and began to tell me that something was down and began to tell me that something was around, off into the woods, and it was letting off growls. My first initial thought was that it was a bear that she had heard. Craig and myself grabbed our guns and exited the tent and walked around the perimeter. The woods were still dead silent. We walked around for about 15 minutes, and after finding nothing, we headed back to the tent and told the girls that it was nothing more than a deer passing through the area. We all managed to fall asleep, but I was awoken 20 minutes later to sounds off into the brush. It sounded like something walked back and forth off in the trees. I looked out the mesh window, but saw nothing. It was just darkness. I woke Craig up quietly to avoid waking up the girls. I told him about the sounds I was hearing off in the brush. We sat there just listening. It sounded like it was about 15 yards away from our camp, and it was inching closer. That's when we heard the grunts. These were deep, guttural, aggressive grunts. Whatever this was, it was big. The footsteps sounded as if it was on 2 feet, so at first I thought it was a homeless man or a hermit drunk, or somebody just messing around. The sound stopped, everything was quiet again, At this moment I grabbed my Glock 17 semi-automatic pistol and cocked it back and laid back down. Soon after that is when it happened. We're all hit by a blood-curdling roar. This roar was so loud and strong I felt my organs vibrating. The girls were immediately awoke by the roar. It stopped as soon as it started. I was greatly terrified at this point. In the midst of the creature roaring, I subconsciously grabbed my gun and was gripping it tightly with the death grip. Craig went outside of his tent first while my girlfriend and Shelley closed up the mesh windows. I got out of the tent and was hit with a gut-wrenching smell. It was horrible. My stomach began to turn as I fought the urge to vomit. I smell it as I'm typing this right now. We began to walk around the edge of the woods with our guns fixed on the darkness, not knowing what the hell was out there. I reached a spot where I had previously took my piss, and just then a tree branch came flying over the heads, crashing into the chairs where the fire was. Then once again a loud roar. This one lasted a lot longer. It was a little bit deeper than the last one. Craig immediately began to fire his gun in the direction of the roar, with me soon joining him. I fired 3 shots, but then stopped. Once I saw Craig stopped. I heard fast-paced, heavy footsteps coming toward us. I took 10 steps back, turned around, and then ran back to the tent where the girls were. I told them, we need to get out of here immediately. I looked up from the tent and saw Craig staring into the brush while slowly walking backwards toward us. I looked into the same direction as he was looking, and that's when I saw it. Standing at about 8 foot tall. A half-human. Had to be a half-human the way this thing looked. This thing was very muscular. There was enough moonlight breaking through the trees to see the definition of its arms and its chest. It was all black with this shiny black fur. It had red, glistening eyes. I pushed the girls back inside the tent and told them to shut it. I looked up, back over the tent, and it was staring right at me while Craig was standing right next to me. At this moment, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I sat there, staring it right in the eyes for about 10 seconds as it let off another roar. My body trembled with fear, but as soon was replaced by adrenaline and anger. I raised my gun and aimed it at the creature's chest. Craig immediately put his hand on my shoulder, telling me, I don't think that's a big enough gun. It then hit me. He was right. This thing was the size of a linebacker on steroids. The creature then started to motion toward us. I fired in its direction to warn it to not come any closer, but it ignored it. I fired a second time with no success. I then got agitated and fired 3 shots at this thing's chest. All 3 hit the creature in its chest. I know I hit it. The creature scrunched its face and gave a growl. At this point, I was standing in the open. I was illuminated by the moonlight. I got a clear look at this creature. It had a face of a human. It did not have a neck. Its head connected right to its shoulders. It then again began to motion toward us. I reloaded my gun and raised it. Craig then also raised his .45 automatic pistol. I began to yell at this thing to not stop or not to come any closer. It was about 15 yards away. It began to growl again. Craig fired 6 shots at this thing. I joined him and let off 5 shots at the thing's chest once again. It then stumbled back, fell to the ground, and took off into the woods. I wasted no time grabbing the girls and telling them, we need to go now. Luckily, the car was only about 50 yards from our campsite. We ran through the brush at full speed. I could hear something keeping pace with us off to the left, but I began to fire in the direction of this thing, and all the while running like my life depended on it. I kept my girlfriend to the right of me until we finally reached a car. She threw me the keys and hopped in, started the car, and we peeled out of there, speeding out of the dirt roads. We was headed out of there as fast as we could get out of there. We looked into our rearview mirror. There was nothing there but darkness. But to the left, it crossed the road to the right in front of us. But it was hunched over to the left, and it was acting like it was injured. Again, we stopped. In front of the headlights, laying in the road, was puddles of blood. We now knew this creature was injured, and probably dying, and it was going to try to get us before we got out of there to get its payback. That's when I told everybody to put their seatbelts on and hold on, and I drove as fast as I could to get everybody out of there. We will never return to this place to camp again because I'm afraid that if it has family, they are now hunting us and have our scent. Well, that was a crazy encounter. Number one thing I want to tell everybody out there, if you're carrying a firearm and you're in the woods Um, know your target before firing. If somebody's firing, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be firing. Um, identify your target and what's beyond your target if you ever have to engage anything with your weapon. Could be a camper, it could be somebody hurt, it could be somebody lost, it could be the game warden walking up to check your camp. So always identify your target and make sure your target is a threat. You know, that's the number one thing. Number two, gun safety. If everybody's worried, nervous, and everything running around, you want to make sure that nobody runs in front of your muzzle out of fear trying to get away. There's a lot of bad things that can happen if you're not prepared for this. People don't mean to run in front of you when they're scared, but they do, because remember, they're not thinking and they're afraid and they're in the fight or flight, and a lot of people's is flight. So we have to remember that when we're out there, we don't end up hurting, an innocent person walking up, to your camp or somebody you're camping with. And you for sure don't want to have to live with that, let alone the consequences of, prison and so forth. So something to think about. Always be aware of where the muzzle of your gun is and never point it at anything, you don't plan on destroying. As far as shooting it, I can't say that I probably wouldn't have shot it if it started coming at me within 15 yards. Uh, I think that is a sign of aggression. If it sees your gun, you've warned it, and it continues towards you. Yeah, I probably would have put a few in it. Shooting for the chest and a handgun, in my opinion, on something that large, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing a chest shot with a handgun unless, it was like a 10 millimeter 357 Magnum, 44 Magnum, something like that with a solid core bullet in it, not a hollow point. I may take chest shots, but I'm telling you right now, if I see a Bigfoot, I'm probably going to be putting one right through the head, because I want to stop it immediately. But just some of my thoughts. What do you all think about this? Thank you guys for watching this video, smashing the like button. That means a lot. I look forward to reading your comments. And again, guys, thank you so much for the support. Keep your head on a swivel, and until next time, don't be something's dinner. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you Saturday night.